I've also heard this saying that says, look, men will buy and pay for something that's twice as more expensive than it should be if they need it. And a woman will buy twice as much as they need of something that's half full.
Yes, exactly.
For something they may not necessarily need.
Yes.
And so I think, going back to the hunter-gatherer type of philosophy, you don't know where you're going to be back to where you're going to get it. If you can buy it, you can get it. And it's our minds, right?
The content presented and discussed is purely intended to be general and educational in nature and should not be construed as specifically tailored investment, financial planning, tax, legal, psychological diagnosis, or other professional advice.
Hello. Thank you all for joining us for another podcast episode of Ask My Man Manny with our brilliant host, Dr. Abby Durkin, and myself, the one and only Manny Henson. Abby, so I thought you had a really interesting topic that you wanted to talk about today, and I'm not going to steal your thunder. What's on your mind? What are you thinking about?
Yeah, so about, 3 months ago or so, all over social media were these funny terms, girl math and boy math, right? And if you guys haven't heard of it, or if you haven't heard of it, it started off as just girl math, and it's a lighthearted trend. Basically, an example of girl math would be and it's shopping related, it's a little bit gender biased, and then we're going to get into more neutral territory. But initially, examples of girl math would be if you set aside $150 to go shopping and you know that the pair of boots that you want is going to be about $150. Well, you get to the store and they're on sale for like 50% off.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that means that you have an extra $75 in your pocket, and everything else that you get with that $75 is now free. And you feel so good, right? Or if you have to take something back to the store and you get a refund, it's now free. Or if you have cash in your wallet and you pay with cash, it's now free because you haven't used your debit or your credit card. So it's these kinds of funny, distorted ways of thinking about things. So this trend caught fire in late summer, and then all the girls apparently got together and was like, wait a second, I don't like this. This isn't so fun anymore. And so then they did a revolt, right? This was like social media war. And then they came up with boy math. And boy math is also funny kind of rounding errors. Like they were picking on like dating apps and saying boy math is saying you're 5'7", but you're actually, saying you're 6 foot, but you're actually 5'7". Right? Or boy math is you shovel the snow in the winter and then think that you've contributed 50% to the household chore list, right? So it's these funny, distorted ways of thinking. And it caught my attention back when it was all over my For You pages on the various platforms that I'm on. But then I was thinking about it from a psychology perspective, and something that I talk about clinically with people a lot are these things called cognitive distortions. And said a simpler way, we'll call them stinking thinking. If you're trying to be cute or relatable, you call it stinking thinking. But there are 15 or so ways that we start to warp our environment in a service of a particular idea. And for girl math, boy math, it comes from, different places. Obviously, those are, we have different motivations for each of those examples. But for cognitive distortions, they tend to be more pervasive. They tend to spread around social interactions, occupational choices, interpersonal relationships. And there's about 10 or 15 of these distortions that are the most common. And you can Google them. They're on Psych Central, Mind Peelings. And one of them that really seems to fit into this girl math, boy math conversation is this distortion of mental filtering. And in the girl math, boy math stuff, the mental filtering is kind of like a positive thing. It's a self-serving in a fun way. It's a self-serving bias where you suddenly see if you present something a certain way to yourself, you come out with an advantage, whether it's the joke about now you suddenly have 75 extra dollars in your pocket. So now everything you buy with that is free. That's still an example of mental filtering, where you are essentially filtering out all the other things that you could do with that $75. You could obviously save it. You could invest it. You could buy gifts with it. You could pay bills with it. Instead, when you're using that girl math filter, you say, oh, it's just free money in my pocket. And everything that I buy with this now is free. It's gratis and I can have a ball with it. For the advantage, like the filtering advantage that is in the boy math is again rounding up in a favorable direction. And that sounds a little bit like gambler's fallacy, where you think, oh, I've done this so many times, I'm bound to win. And that's not based in any reality or statistics. Statistically speaking, 50-50, the house wins. So in these mental filtering processes, it absolutely affects financial decisions. So if you're using a mental filter, right, and you're thinking to yourself, everything that I do doesn't work out. Everything that I do, I'm a failure, right? And these are the negative filters. And these are things that sometimes drive people's behaviors. That can affect how risk averse you are in business or in finance. And so I was wondering, A, if you had ever heard of girl math, boy math before, B, what you think about it, and C, if you've ever seen that in your practice with finance.
Yeah, it's so hard with these conversations. We're trying to say, and look at these normatively and positively as statements of fact around where a general census of people within a certain demographic fit, and it's to be, obviously, there's certainly women who I've spoke with who are very down to the numbers, dollars and cents, and granular, and are very technocratic when it comes to their consumer basis and needs. But yeah, I think that might be something to that. And I also want to say is I've also heard this saying that says, look, men will buy and pay for something that's twice as more expensive than it should be if they need it. And a woman will buy twice as much as they need of something that's half full.
Yes, exactly.
For something they may not necessarily need.
Yes.
And so I think, going back to the hunter-gatherer type of philosophies, you don't know where you're going to be back to where you're going to get it. If you can buy it, you can get it. And it's our minds, right? Mm-hmm. We look at, some fruit or some even biologically, if we see some fruit, we want to buy it. In our mind saying, okay, that fruit looks a lot more tasty than those nuts over there. So let's eat as much pasta as possible as we quickly can. And it will store it as fat, if you're looking at that, years, decades, centuries ago, thousands of years ago.
Yeah, it really gets into...
There's a logical reason for that.
Yeah, like these micro decisions that people make all throughout the day. And it's based on their internal values, their internal attitudes, which are shaped by, their environment that they're in, culturally, family, friends, things that they see on social media, those all contribute to how people are filtering out and making those micro decisions. So even when you're thinking, okay, it was $75 extra, if you're using that as a mental filter, it's often like unconscious. And my psychologist heart was really happy to see the girl math, boy math conversation, because it's shining light in a humorous way on internal information that is oftentimes very private to the individual. Sometimes the individual isn't even aware that they are operating with a filter in the moment. And so I get really excited when I see psychology concepts evolving into other spaces. And that's partly why I love working with you so much, because this is psychology as it is evolving into the finance space, in the economic space. And then in this girl math, boy math conversation, it brings it back down to that granular place of that personal filter that is involved in those micro decisions that we make every day. And I think maybe you remember people doing some trends on social media about the Starbucks volume of cup sizes, that the tall amount, that the liquid in the tall fills the grande and that fills the venti, and people were losing their minds. But those micro decisions that you make, when you go up to the Starbucks counter, you're like, oh, I'm just going to get the grande because, it's not that much more. Well, guess what that not much more thought is? It's a filter. And it's a filter that you're saying, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to do it because are you telling yourself that it's a good deal? Are you telling yourself that you're getting more value for your money? Are you telling yourself that you're getting more product for your money? Are you telling yourself that you deserve it for an emotional reason? So all these filters, they really do impact how people spend on an everyday basis. Another one of these distortions is called polarized or all or nothing thinking. And that's when people often look at the world in an all or nothing way, or they think very black and white. Like sometimes you see this with brand loyalty. I'm only going to wear Adidas. Adidas is the best, and sometimes people can get really entrenched in that. And especially since the holidays are coming up, you might be hearing or seeing all or nothing thinking from your family and from your kids. Like, I have to have this thing. Only this thing is good enough, right? And the parents, AKA Santa, jump through the hoops to get that thing and they get the wrong thing. And then like Christmas is a disaster. Well, you can clearly see some of these distorted mental filters, these polarization, all or nothing thinking. You can clearly see them in little kids, and as adults, mature thinkers, we would hope, we look at that and we say, why can't you just be happy? You didn't get the Susie Smiles a lot. You got the Cabbage Patch Kid. They both have brown hair. They both have da-da-da. The parent is looking at it from a much more flexible perspective of a doll is a doll. And the kid is like, it's not Susie Smiles a lot. I don't want it, and the dog goes flying across the living room and Christmas is over, canceled. Mom and dad canceled, right? So you can see these cognitive distortions in kids too. But yeah, I really was thinking about this in the context of those financial micro decisions. And if you've worked with clients, because I have my own strategies, but I was wondering if you've ever encountered clients that might have that all or nothing or polarized filter, and how you've used finance to get them to a more flexible place with regards to their money.
Oh yeah, definitely. This is a spot on conversation, and when we were talking about Christmases, I was thinking about getting Super Mario's time machine. I was like, what, Super Mario's time machine? It was good, but it was good. It was a good game. All right, so I'm not going to say it wasn't a bad game. It was a good game. One of the classic things, and this is it's something we learned actually that formed some of the amendments to the Retirement Act of 2006 was a book that was written by a economist, and they came up with this idea called nudge theory. And I'm sure you probably have heard of it. Nudge theory says, all right, when we can create a decision framework that makes it easier for people to make good decisions, that's a better decision. And so out of that came your auto escalation when it comes to retirement plans. So if you look at most of the retirement plans today, and it was even reaffirmed with this idea with some of the recent improvements to the Retirement Act in last December, if you as an employer set up a retirement plan with auto enrollment, you will get some particular type of credit. And so it makes it easy for you to get people to do things that they would normally do anyway, if they took out a lot of the different steps involved in making the decision. And then they can always go backwards. They can change that, but we got to make it easy for people to make the right decision. And so for a lot of people I talk to who are getting raises, they're changing jobs, increasing their net cash flow, right? So I might say, all right, you've been living off of 100,000. Okay. Now you're making 150,000. Well, you know what your lifestyle felt like at 100,000. And yes, you want to reward yourself from going from 100 to 150. What if you saved a part of that $50,000 difference? You increase your savings, your investments by a little bit, and you increase your spending. You have some immediate joy out of that. And so when you take these episodes where you have some positive surprises, and I'm trying to help people trying to make knowledgeable decisions and make it easier for them to kind of think about savings and investing in a more digestible way. a palatable way. It's easier to say, I'm going to save extra off of something they've never seen than to tell them, hey, right now you're making 100,000, you need to cut expenses, and you need to save, 15%. That might be the same conclusion as going up 150 or cutting out some expenses and saving that difference, even though you might end up with the same conclusion.
Yeah, and I really resonate with what you said, and especially from the context of my practice. You said you want to make it as easy as possible for people to make the right decision. And when I'm working with someone who is deep into a particular mental filter that is getting in their way, I do the very same thing, but with slightly different tools. So what I do is I look at the cost benefit of what they're doing in the moment. How much is this particular filter really serving you? And that involves a radical acceptance of their reality as it is. So if they're in a situation, let's say that they're in a job that pays really well, but is making them completely miserable and is impacting pervasively every other aspect of their life. We do a cost benefit from a psychology perspective of what are the hidden and unseen costs to you staying in this position, and how can we open up your aperture just a little bit more to entertain, i.e. cognitive flexibility. How do we entertain other sources of revenue that might not be as, impactful in a negative way or disruptive to everything else that you have going on in your life? And these conversations, it's often not a one and done. It often takes a few sessions because there's practices that are involved. There's first the exposure of what this filter is, and then there's some good old-fashioned analysis of, is this filter actually getting you further down the line, right? So the conclusion, and looking at this from an objective perspective, the conclusion that the client might come to is, okay, I've done my due diligence. I've done the cost benefit analysis, both seen and unseen costs to myself and my loved ones and my bank account. And I'm going to decide to stay in this job. But I'm going to operate within this job a bit differently. Maybe this person decides that they're not going to put themselves up for the next promotion. Maybe they're going to stop volunteering, i.e., sending themselves off into la la land that they're not getting paid for because it's maybe serving a virtue that they have of being altruistic or selfless or being a good teammate. Are there ways, if they choose to stay in that position for financial reasons, which is a huge motivating, important factor, are there other ways that their energy is leaking out that's costing them that energy, which is a very highly valuable investment? How people choose to invest their energy is, I would think, one of the most costly decisions that you make. And so if you say, okay, I've done my radical acceptance, I know that this job as it is grinding me into a dust, and I want to make a change, but I can't afford emotionally, psychologically, and financially to make that giant leap out of this position into the unknown. And I see this happen with people who are going through different life transitions. If they're coming up on retirement, that process of throwing yourself into the land of private employers or private sector, or the person who's in private sector and then says, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to be my own boss. Is the timing lining up? Is the motivation for doing this big change? Are you operating under a mental filter, or are you doing your due diligence to say, all right, I've calculated out the seen and unseen costs, and I'm going to proceed in a way that, like you were saying about nudging, gets me closer to my goal of balance? Because this is also a conversation about clarifying goals. Is your goal truly work-life balance? Is your goal to suffer temporarily for personal enrichment? What is your goal? And having people articulate that. And my final point on that, and I'll turn it back to you, but is when you were talking about nudging, that also implies that you as the provider of this service and me as a provider of my service have in mind what the end state should be for the client's optimal health, whether it's financial health or psychological health. And we have to have that goal in mind. We have to use our education, our expertise to say, we believe in this goal for you, that this is the right course of action. And then gaining that trust with that client so that they follow your advice. That is an ongoing relationship that, takes constant management and tweaking and helping that client navigate some of the ups and downs of life, even after you've come to agreement with them, like this is the goal that we should take, right?
So I'm going to make one correction about what it says. I think you're close. You're getting at it. And one is what my goals I suggest clients, tactics that clients I suggested they do are reflective of their values, their values. That's the key. And that is hard in the environment, in the space where everyone feels like they have, every financial expert has their mousetrap and they're the best at what they do. All you hear is this noise about, forget about all these other strategies. Do this because everybody has the same value, get as much money and the least amount of risk. That's not necessarily true. I mean, that could be partly true, but it could just be, look, my values are I want to spend more time with my family. I want to create a life where I don't feel I need to have to give up a lot of the things that are important to me. And that might mean a smaller footprint, a less demanding job, a little less money, but I need to plan around that. And so how do I create these plans to reflect my value? And once I know, hey, these are your values, this is what we said your goal is going to be. And then it becomes challenging. That's when it comes to the point where I'd say, hey, you know what? You said this was important to you. Has anything changed since the last time we talked about why it was important to you? And then that's where they start willing, oh my goodness, I didn't going to get that far. I really didn't want to talk about this, or I'm not sure if I want to make it. I got this really big job. I'm not sure if I'm ready. This opportunity, I'm not sure if I'm ready for it. Or, I really don't want to do this job, but I've been doing this my whole life and I want to change this. How do I budget starting that new business? And so that's where I find that the convincing needs to be done. It's not necessarily convincing them that they need to have a particular goal. It's like when it gets really tough, when the market's sideways, market's down, or, they have a setback at work and they told me these are their values. And we created a strategy that reflects their values. And now they're questioning, oh my goodness, maybe I should have done something different. Maybe I should have different values.
Yes.
And so I'm there to kind of remind them. And so part of that is all in my process. I have some things that I know people are not certain about. And so when we create a plan, I have overall goals that they have set. And I tell them, like, look, all these goals we write down, this is today. We're going to talk about them every couple of weeks, couple of months. These are going to change. But as they change, I want us to have an open conversation about that. And in every meeting we have, we're going to set the priorities at that point in time in the future. And so for some people that might be, all right, let's work on that retirement plan. And then they might be, the next time is, oh my goodness, I'm uncertain about, where my company's business is going. Should we focus on my debt repayment plan so that I have less bills just in case I get laid off, or if they announce lay off, if I don't get a plan and there's a merger and I'm not part of the new company. Was my plan B, C? Manny, can you help me draft that? And so I'm there to kind of help them figure out, one, what their values are. First of all, a lot of people can't articulate it in our finance speak. Mm-hmm. Right. Yes. And then secondly, what are the goals? What are the strategies to get those goals? What are the processes, those individual steps to get to that goal? And then breaking it all down to digestible pieces, and then just throwing all that away, because in 5 years, 5 weeks, you're going to want something different anyway. And so I'm there to help people start over, start where they are, continue where they are, and just remind them, like, look, this is what your values are. It's going to be tough when it's tough. And when they change, let's just move with it.
Yeah, that's excellent. Having people clarify their values is such an important step for both parties, whether, they're seeking psychological services, coaching services, financial services, understanding the why behind what they're doing is so helpful for everybody. And then beyond, once they clarify their values, managing those periods of uncertainty that can drive up additional mental filters, things like catastrophic thinking. If I don't do this way at this time, it's not going to work out. Like nothing's going to work out. And it's important when you're thinking about these distortions or these mental filters that one of the reasons why they are disruptive is because they overlook other scenarios. And the same goes for that catastrophic mentality of if I don't operate this way, if I don't do something by this specific time, they then jump to this worst case scenario without considering all the other scenarios that it could be. And this also shows up with generalization or personalization as well. If people are assuming that, let's say that they didn't get a promotion, if their natural inclination cognitively is to personalize negative experiences, their morale and their productivity suffers. If they believe in their heart that the reason that they didn't get selected for something that they tried to get was a personal reason, that can erode that individual's work ethic. Understandably, it's a very demoralizing experience to have. And financial choices and financial behaviors around that moral injury, that emotional wound, absolutely affects those micro financial decisions. So it's an ongoing conversation, and it's one that does, I think, benefit from having coaches, whether it's financial coaches or behavioral economic coaches like myself, where you're saying, okay, we know that these are your values, but operating consistently in alignment with your values, it can be really hard, right? Just when you think about starting a new diet because the new year's around the corner, sticking with those values of health is so hard because most people fail, within a few weeks or a month or so after making those ominous New Year's resolutions. So the value is important to identify, but the day-to-day work of managing your mental filters and making sure that they are serving you and your goals is something that I think really benefits from having those experts and those coaches alongside to say, let's nudge you in the direction that you find important for yourself and for your practice and for your job and for your family.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it any better. It really, it comes down to the fact that emotions are innate, survival-based features of being human that have been being created, fine-tuned, and to keep us out of danger, that sometimes help us, but in other times are very detrimental. And so that all or nothing thing is like I have clients who are like, oh my goodness, our equity market is down. So should we do sell everything and just go into fixed income? Is it just fixed income or just equities? And so, yeah, there's no panacea. A lot of things are important. It's a balance of that. And so we're making tilts. We're making small adjustments. We're using what we know, we find out about the world. But we're keeping it in context that this is one data point. This is one set of data that helps us understand where we are in the world. And yeah, you may need to change what you're doing in life. You may need to change your career, but let's look at all of the facts. Is this emotion coming from a place where it makes sense that you should, well, it's making sense in emotions. Maybe that's a poor word or phrase to use, but is it emotion helping you? What does this emotion serve? What purpose does it serve? And then working backwards from there.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Manny. That was a great talk.
I thank everybody for joining us, and we got to continue this conversation again. Keep on keeping on. Santa, my last thought is, and some people are going to, get something from Santa. If you can, try to consider, having Santa give the small gifts and mom and dad being the people, the kids give you the big gifts. There are going to be some people at school that your kids are going to go to school with or aren't going to get
Yeah.
nearly as much as you might be giving. And so let's try to create an environment where we're improving, we're looking at this holiday, the season, as what it truly reflects. It's a period of giving. And I appreciate everybody's attention today.
Yeah. Thank you, Manny.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care, everybody.
The content presented and discussed is purely intended to be general and educational in nature and should not be construed as specifically tailored investment, financial planning, tax, legal, psychological diagnosis, or other professional advice. Any data cited is valid as of the date of presentation, but please know that such data are frequently subject to change. Any investment performance referenced is purely past performance, which is no guarantee of any future performance. Nothing contained in this course should be construed as an offer to sell, a solicitation of an offer to buy, or a recommendation of any security or other financial product or investment strategy. All investment, tax, and financial planning strategies involve risk that you should be prepared to bear. Investment, financial planning, tax, legal, and other professional advice is specific to each individual and entity.